che bel mazzo di fiori.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this afternoon's session of the festival, the seminar called Lost in La Dolce Vita. My name is Anne-Louise Dahlgren, and I'm so pleased to be here this afternoon to moderate this talk. Just one technical aspect before we start. It says in the program that this seminar will be held in Swedish, Italian and English. But as it were, we all speak English. So let's stick to English, if you're okay with that. At Göteborg Film Festival 2016, there are screened 20 new Italian films, whereof 7 are debut directors. And this focus has been possible to produce together with Istituto Luce, which is the Italian Film Institute, and their promotional international department, Film Italia. Of these 20 new films, never screened before in Sweden, there are a lot of new perspectives, new looks, and new ways of making cinema. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the Italian contemporary cinema. And I would like to introduce two of these very most interesting directors, new Italian filmmakers. Well, one new Italian filmmaker, and he's here with his debut film, Arianna, Carlo Lavagna.
Thank you.
And Roberto Minervini, who is here in Gothenburg with the other side. And you have made films, triology on Texas, and now you go to Louisiana. And Arianna is set in Italy. We will all have a good look at these films a bit later on. But to introduce also the Italian contemporary cinema today, we have a very special guest who is Gloria Satta, film critic from the Italian daily newspaper Il Messaggero, and she's been in the business for over 40 years. So if anyone knows everything about Italian cinema, it's Gloria. I myself, I lived in Italy for 15 years. And I can't resist to ask you a question now, because I myself, one of the reasons why I moved to Italy was because I fell in love with Italy through Ettore Scola. And we loved each other so much. I know it might be, a silly question to ask, but I would still like to introduce this seminar in this way. Have you got any directors who have actually inspired you a lot from back home? Roberto.
Yeah, our tradition is strong. I grew up during the 70s, and I was influenced since I was very little. I still remember watching neorealist filmmakers, and my family exposed me to Pasolini very early, perhaps too early. Consequences the cinema I make today, but I am very fond of Pasolini, and I will always be. But there's such a strong, powerful film tradition we have.
And you, Carlo?
Yeah, of course. But we grew up watching all the classic Italian films, which I love personally. I love Scola very much, speaking of which, I feel something very special attached to his films, because there's a way in his films of setting up the places where he shoots that is very touching. So it's not only about the characters, but it's about the places. So the way he portrays Rome, or he portrays, I don't know, there's something that feels really lively to me, and that gave me a lot, and I try to put it back in my film.
You can't really ask a film critic who is your favorite director, so let me readdress the question. Who, Gloria, would you say of the contemporary Italian directors of today have had the biggest impact on new filmmakers in Italy and abroad?
Well, I think that Italian cinema is very strongly linked to comedy. So comedy is among genres of cinema is the one who has had the most powerful impact on new generation of directors, and that's why Ettore Scola is one of the masters that everybody celebrates today. You know, he has just died, unfortunately, and but we have also the great tradition of Monicelli, Comencini, the great screenwriters who wrote very strong comedies of our tradition. So I can say that yesterday and nowadays, comedy is the most powerful genre of Italian cinema, even too much, if I may say that, because everybody wants to make comedies. Comedies make a big impact, grossing at the box office. So I think this is the strong characteristic of our cinema. But at the same time, there are a lot of new directors who try to make other films, other kind of films. Minervini and Carlo are very good examples of this kind of cinema, who is not strictly linked to Italian tradition of comedy. They make a cinema who is able to be more universal and exported all over the world.
And that actually brings me to the next question. You both actually left Italy to make your filmmaking kick off. Where did you go, Carlo?
Actually, I came to Sweden for a bit right after. I was doing documentaries at the beginning of my career, documentaries about cinema, because I had a big love for cinema, and I wanted to investigate the cinematography around the world. So I came here, stayed 1 year. I actually shot in this theater in Pustervik.
Oh.
Incredible. So 12 years ago, and it was strange, but it's good to be back. There was Gunnar Berdal was the director,
yes.
And it was good. So yes, so I came to Sweden. I did documentaries here. Then I moved to the United States. I did some documentaries there as well. First about cinema, then about ghettos in New York. Characters from the ghettos of New York, and then there I started to research for the film that eventually I decided to do in Italy, because I wanted to shoot my first film there. I found it that I wanted to set up a story that wasn't maybe that much of an Italian story. Of course it is, but in the stricto sensu is not that. And then I went back to Italy. But I had to go through a bit of countries before going back.
And you, Roberto?
Well, my story is the story of a migration, an immigrant. I had to leave because I needed to find a job, and at that time, it's an Italian story in a way, like not being able to find a job. And I graduated in economics, so I ended up in Spain working for a chamber of commerce. And then I moved to the US, trying to climb up the ladder. I became an IT consultant, and after losing my job because of September 11, I became a victim of September 11. I got compensated with enough money to pay a master in media studies. I lost all my clients in the Twin Towers. So,
oh, really?
And so it's a very, almost romantic. So that makes it for a very Italian romantic and nostalgic story of, having to migrate to search for jobs I made virtue out of necessity, and I think I became a filmmaker the same way, just rolling up my sleeves and, yeah.
Certainly a lot in the luggage, both of you. I'd like us to structure this afternoon together, that we now start to talk a bit about Italian contemporary cinema today, and then we actually watch clips from these two gentlemen's productions and films and discuss them. But let's turn back the clock a little bit. As this seminar is entitled Lost in La Dolce Vita, we could just sort of wash off that stamp now, I'd say, and to explain how it all started. Well, how did it all start? Well, there was Mr. Mussolini, who in 1938 actually decided to let cinema be the best way of propaganda. Cinema is the best armor, was the propaganda he used. And he founded Cinecittà, the Italian film studios in Rome. After the war, they were the only facilities, brand new facilities in all over Europe. So this was the mecca for all filmmakers from all over the world to come to Italy. After the war, you paid very little, and you had this melting pot of artists, musicians, filmmakers, a lot of Americans coming to Italy and to Rome. And it was Hollywood on Tiber. And that was La Dolce Vita, and that's what Fellini, of course, tried to capture in his film. But just to make, that's where it all took off. But that was a long, long time ago. And Gloria, what would you say, how has cinema developed in Italy since then? Because there has happened a lot of things since Dolce Vita.
Dolce Vita was a very a short period of our history, a period which is not related only to cinema, but also with nowadays life, costume, attitudes, and Rome, particularly Rome, a particularly special street in Rome, Via Veneto. You must have heard of it. This is a street who still sounds time of Fellini, the big American stars, Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, but now everything has finished. So this short period, after this short period, when American cinema, American stars and directors came to shoot their films in Rome. Cleopatra, for example, was one of the most famous films who were shot in that period in Rome. After that, cinema developed, especially in comedies. The most successful film of the 60s were Italian films, were comedies with big actors such as Alberto Sordi, Ugo Tognazzi, Nino Manfredi. So that was the most important genre of films in the 60s. After that, Italian cinema discovered the directors. So there was a period of films, art films, who were, let's say, a little bit difficult for audiences. Not only audience wanted to see them, but there was art cinema. And then, after a big crisis, economical crisis in the 1980s, we can say that in the last 20 years, Italian cinema has, is again a good cinema, has new directors, new ideas. Now, this is a very fresh news, has got a lot of money from government, because traditionally the big problem of Italian cinema has always been the lack of money, the lack of sheer money from government. Now, in the last days, government decided to finance really strongly, permanently cinema, which is a very good news.
As a matter of fact, the Minister of Culture, Mr. Dario Franceschini, declared last week that the cinema sector in Italy will be given another 60% of the statal budget.
Yes.
Divided, of course, onto different aspects of the cinema, also distribution, cinemas in Italy and so on. But that's around 150 million euros extra to the film sector.
Of course. The problem is that cinema has not been considered until now a very important department of Italian industry, Italian industrial system. For example, I think to France, where cinema is very strongly financed by government, by the states, because they know that cinema is a very important part of the industry. Now, this mentality is becoming to get into Italy too, so which is very good, because without financement.
How do you think this will affect you, Carlo?
No, the thing is that it's interesting because it's a two ways. There are two arrows going to different. On one hand, Italian cinema got in crisis also specifically when the state decided that Italian cinema should have been supported only with Italian director of photography, so that a certain amount, very high amount of people should have been Italian, and that's when all the big American, all the investors left Italy because before, and so I think personally that before there was a way more interesting and a way more, there was a more lively way because there was competition. So people come, it was like a real industry, okay? Because you have competition, it's not that I'm feeding you saying, yeah, hey, this is your, a totally welfare thing. That easily went into like a big crisis when Dino De Laurentiis left for America and found Dino Città.
Dino De Laurentiis is one of the biggest and most known producers in Italy.
Blah, blah, blah. It was a really like a venturer, Then Italy became like more of a welfare state. And okay, you have to make, you have to deal with that and see, okay, now it's changed. And it's true that once you become this kind of country, if you don't have the sponsorship, you struggle. Because if this is the only way to make cinema, that's why for many years Italy had problems, had identity problems, globalization really didn't do well to Italy because if when even now the mentality of most of like the producers or people in the ministry stuff, they want to do only comedies. They look at the United States as a place to imitate or to do like these Italians, with ideas maybe struggle because they don't relate to that. It's like there's always an abundance within our culture. So finally now, and I hope that since yesterday they give this 400 million every year.
Every year. So
every year, it's a lot of money.
Producer must know what they can count on, because every year was a dilemma. How am I going to work? I don't know how many millions, how many euros. We don't know. At the last time, government decided to give some money or not, more or less than the year before. So now something is
happening.
And about American production, let me please, I would like to say that they encourage now foreign production, big production, American production, to come to shoot in Italy. That's why, for example, the last James Bond film has been shot in Rome, and also Zoolander 2. A new film. So because there are some facilities for foreign production to come to work with in Italy.
There might be a chance of Rome regaining the world status that it once had when it comes to film production. But Roberto, please intervene.
Being co-produced by France and Italy, and I have to say Italian institutions have been very supportive of my cinema. However, what I see, which transcends, even the amount of funding, I feel that the bureaucratic apparatus in Italy moves slower than the French apparatus, and that is the apparatus is not on pace with our needs, the needs of the filmmakers, especially independent filmmakers, where liquidity, cash flow is an issue. And I can see the struggle my Italian producers, they have to deal with the extended, diluted times of Italian financing system, for which they are cash strapped because they need to wait a long time until funds come in. Whereas, not to mention the process to get approved, to get a project approved, the interviews and all the steps that we need to go through. Whereas in France, they support authorship, and the process of the funding process can be expedited if there's a decision. The decision of supporting the author is made. Cash arrives faster, so smaller productions like mine, which qualifies independent productions, really will benefit from a slimmer bureaucratic process in Italy. I mean, it makes it really hard to continue, depending on such a gargantuan and
But also there's still a
machine.
tradition of attitudes in a way in Italy. Sometimes, even if you're born in 1970, you were still considered a young filmmaker. So that's also...
Born in 1970.
In Italy, usually we live 120, 130 years, so 40, we're still young.
But that's another problem sometimes, because I actually collected a few of the other filmmakers who have been, the other 13 filmmakers who have been here during the week. 13 Italian guests at the festival. That's fantastic, isn't it? And yes, actually, worth an applause. And some of them were saying that they have experienced, they're still experiencing this problem with attitudes in the business, which is a challenge. But actually last year in Italy, there were produced 187 films. So there are a lot of new films coming out. Unfortunately, maybe 20% of them actually made the Italian part of the total market in Italy. But on the other hand, this is the reality also in Sweden, in other countries. And in Italy, in Sweden, there are 2 or 3 titles that we get every year with our distributors that actually buy Italian film. And I actually talked to a few of them. We have like Scanbox, Folkets Bio, Non-Stop Entertainment, 3 Art, and so on. And before this talk this afternoon, I wanted to hear what they actually think about the situation. And as a matter of fact, the films that they import, like Moretti, Sorrentino, and these names you all know about, the titles that actually go best, they get the best audience here, are smaller auteur films like Pranzo di Ferragosto, di Gianni Di Gregorio, August Lunch, I don't know whether you've seen it, which opens up, I'd say, for a lot of Italian auteur films that actually make their way to Sweden and the Nordic countries. How would you, as filmmakers, like it to, how would you like to open up that window, the Nordic window, in a sort of easier way?
Well, it's, I don't know, it's a culture, I don't know with Sweden, but it's the decline in not only distribution, but also, attendances, and even the smaller window that there is for independent, edgier, more auteur-driven project. The window is getting smaller and smaller. It's a cultural issue in the area. I mean, again, it is a banality, it's cliche, but unfortunately they're true in the area of television, of fast-paced products, easy, disposable, 30 to 1 hour format. Products. It's harder and harder to not only to find distribution, even when a project like mine has distribution, to really attract audiences. I work. My last film has been as distributed by a very prominent distributor, Italian distributor, Lucky Red. However, so the distribution is there and it's strong, but it's hard to gather audiences. So I think distributors know that. It's the law of the market, and I feel it's sometimes hard to blame the distributors, but again, as a filmmaker, I'm just going to give you a quick example. In France, my film has been released 5 days after the tragic attacks, and of course we wanted to postpone it, the release, but at the same time I say, okay, well, I'm going to postpone the release for market reasons. Okay, we're going to lose money at attendances. Now, as an artist, that is the time to take a risk, and because it's a contribution to society. Again, cliches but true. So let's make a sacrifice here, and I decided let's move on, knowing that we'll lose audiences. So in a way, again, this might be idealistic, but distribution used to be not just a business. Of course, there was more institutional support, but there has to be more risk-taking attitude from distributors. Self-censorship is very damaging to society. We need to rely on festivals to exist, and it's a problem. It's a cultural problem, and I think people should hold themselves, even distributors, accountable for that. It's a big responsibility not to distribute at times.
As a matter of fact, that's why I wanted to move on to the festivals. You've both been with your films at the festivals. You had your film, The Other Side, in Cannes in Un certain regard last year, and Ariana was in Venice, in the Venice Day section. How do you experience that the festivals actually help to promote the films? Are they sufficient in a way, or should you work harder on that?
No, it's a very bit, I think, going to big festivals is, especially in my case, it was the first film, not expected. We invited the people to watch the film at a private, screening, just like without knowing them. They liked the film, they invited us, and so for us it was a big surprise. And when you're there, it is in fact a big, it's a good way to show yourself, to talk about yourself. Then there is all this fuzz, but then of course it doesn't, transfer to what I was saying before, getting audiences afterwards.
Or distribution.
Distribution. We had Istituto Luce, which was, but also in Italy it's hard for many reasons, because there are in fact what he said, he has with a strong distribution, way stronger than Istituto Luce. They say in the 70s there was this joke about
the drugs.
The drugs. Let's solve the heroin problem in Italy. Give distribution to Istituto Luce. But anyways, there was a bad joke.
It's a joke, but not so much.
No, but they do support a lot. I mean, I wouldn't have had any distribution if it wasn't for them, so I have to be very, very thankful. But what I'm saying is that no matter what, you go with Istituto Luce, which is a small one, you go to a stronger one. We thought, no, we've been kicked off of the screenings because maybe Lucky Red wanted to put his own, because there's stronger stuff. But then it is true, to a certain extent, because of course, when you have, not so many screens, in the case of Pietro Marcello, which is an amazing film that really should be seen in Italy, they kept it for 1 week, and it was going well because another film should have been put there. It's insane.
Let me just say that Pietro Marcello's film Lost and Beautiful is also in the competition here for the Ingmar Bergman Debut Award.
So, yeah.
Yes, but now I think we talked a lot about what you've done so far, but we haven't really seen your work. So why don't we actually have a good look at your films, some clips from your films? Shall we start with your film, Roberto? Sure. And let's start a clip, and then you will tell us a bit about your film. Roberto, your film is actually filmed in 2 different communities in Louisiana.
Right.
How come you chose to start there?
Well, all my films are tied. There are family ties. The link all the characters on my films, and this film is no exception. There's people there have families in Texas where I live. My neighbors, the form part of my world. So I went to Louisiana to continue this search. This kind of, there was something anthropological about it, but there's also something that is safe for me to move, among people that I already know. So the trust is already built partly. So this is why I went to Louisiana. And I found Louisiana is second poorest state of America. There's one of the hubs of the production of methamphetamine, and also there are big militia that move between Texas and Louisiana. The anti-government militia, all over. It's a big phenomenon right now.
You're following Mark and Lisa. We saw Mark here in the first clip. 2 people living in a very dark world of addiction, but trying to get out of it. How do you get so close to these people? I don't know whether you've seen this. Have a lot of people in the audience seen the film when it screened last night in the cinemas here? Anybody? One person. Okay, so we have to explain a bit more about it then.
Well, getting close again, there's that first level of trust that is established. I've been around. I've known people for more than 8 years, and also there is playing with the car, putting all the cards on the table, being transparent. I mean, there's no shortcut to intimacy. I am there as an open book. I speak clearly about what I want to do, what I think, everything. I am with the camera on. I don't exist without a camera. So if that is something that doesn't work, then I can be kicked out in the beginning. So I am presenting myself for who I am, and I talk clearly about what I want. And I film many stories. Mark and Lisa, some of the stories that I was able to depict successfully. In other cases, I am unsuccessful. There is no intimacy and there is no mutual trust, at least not enough to continue working together. And so the stories die off quickly. So it's a process that has more to do with how I interact as a human. I'll present myself as a human being rather than as a filmmaker in a way. It has little to do with cinema, more to do with, human relationships.
Yes, because there are some really explicit scenes in this film, for instance, where you're really close to them in intimate scenes, sex scenes, when they inject, and some very, very close.
The result is a real cinema. You see, this has something more to do with human relationship, but the result is a wonderful film. It's real cinema.
Right. The results, well, you're right, absolutely. The result, perhaps, I assume, I don't know if I'm successful or not, but that's the idea, to get close, as close to reality, real cinema, the real as possible. Obviously not the only one doing this. Fortunately, in Italy, there's great examples. You mentioned Pietro, but there's great examples. So the explicitness, I think, cinema, yes, it has to do something with cinema. Cinema can be very empowering. I do not underestimate the fact that cinema gives, the exposure that cinema can give to a subject matter or to a person. The spotlight that it puts to a person is something very unique, and it reaches audiences everywhere. We talked about this, risks and benefits of being exposed, and maybe even coming to Sweden, right, in their nakedness, soul-wise and body-wise. There's something very magical about cinema. Only cinema perhaps can do that, and yes, so it does have something to do with the power of this art form.
Speaking about audience, this might be a different question from what we're talking about now, but in Italy, a lot of films are dubbed. Your film was not dubbed, it was subtitled. How did you think that actually affected the audience flow?
Oh, it was tremendously truncated. I mean, it chops off a huge chunk of audiences. That is another cultural problems. But again, it's not. I don't know why the sacrifices in a way. I was talking to the distributors, and I was saying, yes, the auteur, I'm going to sacrifice myself. Yes, we're going for it with the original, language cinema. And at some point, I said, but man, I like to contribute, but I also like to get some benefits out of it. Perhaps I don't know. Sometimes I think let's just dub it, because that's what the market
People
asks
want.
for. But then ultimately, my conscience told me not to. But it's hard. I mean, again, it's hard to plant the seeds.
Yeah.
Of a new way of seeing, things and cinema. It's hard to plant the seeds, but seeds need to be planted. As I said before, we were talking about distribution being lost in La Dolce Vita. This business comes with a moral infrastructure. There is a responsibility in making this business from all ends, the filmmaker, but also the distributor. We are all held accountable. We are vulnerable. These films will outlive us, and we should all take responsibility, maybe take the losses. Distributors must do this business with a conscience. This is not just a mere business. So the same. I mean, we needed to plant the seeds and lose audiences. This is what it's about, partly at least. Otherwise, I did a lot of office jobs, and we should all go back to banking. Not all. I'm just saying us, the distributor, me.
As I said before, the films in this focus are all very different and all have very different approaches. And your film, Carlo, Arianna, is a film that actually has a very special theme. And I'd like us to see 2 clips. We start with 1 clip, and then we talk a little bit, and then we follow a very short one. Please, Arianna. Carlo, you made a very strong debut film about Arianna, a film on sexual identity and the search of sexual identity. Please.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I talk about this. It's not that I picked up, the subject matter as I wanted to make a film about intersexuality or hermaphroditism. It was something that I related to since I was a little kid. So I always wanted to make a film about identity somehow. I used to have these dreams when I was little about being a woman, around when I was 9 or 10, like an older woman, and they were recurrent dreams. So I was always puzzled, confused about myself. Why would I dream these dreams? Why am I the person I am? So these sort of ontological questions about wondering who you are and what's your place in the world. In my case, maybe it was more erotic, but there was nothing erotical about the dreams, but maybe the aspect of being a woman or different. And I think that that's the seed that stayed in me, and later on I decided to investigate more on this matter. And then I started to read books. I studied philosophy at university, so completely different. Also, I never did cinema studies or anything. And then from then on, when I went to America, I wanted to make a documentaries out of this. I started to follow, the first associations that they were forming in America at the time. I followed a lot of characters around. I went with them, hospitals. They were beginning to advocate to stop the surgery to intersex people. They opened up their lives, and it was very, very, to me, was a very interesting process. But then I decided that in my case, I wanted to move to a different way of telling stories, and I wanted to maybe pick up the best of each story, because maybe I didn't find the strength to each of the story like he's searching when he does a film, but each of them had maybe a strength aspect to it. Then I said, okay, let's make a film of it. Let's put together everything, go back to Italy, and then make a film in Italy about this subject. And that's how I did. And then we wrote the script.
And yes, there you met Carlo Lavagna, who's with us here today, who's the scriptwriter, and the producer, Mr. Tommaso Bertrani, here in the audience. And you did a very good job. I got to say, when I watched this film, and I read after in the credits when it says that this film is not based on a true story, I don't believe you. This is a very convincing script. You came through very well in this. So, I mean, it's a fantastic way of actually...
Yeah, it's a written, of course, otherwise, Carlo would be mad at me. No, but it's true. Of course, it's written. Everything, it's fictional. There's
it's very close to someone close to you.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think everything, we wouldn't have been, possible to write what we did if we didn't have that experience. There were certain things. It's a thematic film in a way. Mm-hmm. So even if there are moments that are not believable, that are not, maybe we're pushing too much in the script, and you think, okay, maybe this is, to me, it's not important. That to me was really like, once I got deep into this subject, I said there are certain things that need to be there, no matter what. In this way, it's a theme that lays back the film. And then, of course, we were careful to make a film that could, tell a story. And then we wrote many times. We wrote, really like hundreds of first drafts. The film changed. And then when Tommaso came along to be the producer of the film, we said, okay, let's focus now. We have to make the decision. What's the script? And then especially with the kids, with the young people, we had, written scenes. Then because we had time with them, we spent a lot of time before shooting the film with them in that house that we had. We locked ourselves in. And we were maybe with a small camera shooting the scenes, improvising, try to get their language, and then write them back, and then again, and so on. So when we got to on the set, we had everything was clear.
As a matter of fact, the leading actress, and it's her debut film as well, Ondina Quadri, makes a very, very strong debut here. Let's just see another really short clip, 35 seconds of her.
That's very strong. I didn't know. No, sorry about the quality. It's very dark. I mean, the film is not as dark. It's lower quality.
As we touched the subject, but it's about hermaphrodism, and she is finding out her two parts, basically, both physically and mentally. And this is her depicted in her way of finding herself. So we are running out of time, but I would like to open up for some questions, because these two filmmakers are extremely interesting, and they're presenting two very different films. And we also have our film critic here from Italy. So if there are any questions from the audience, please. Have you seen Ariana? Anybody in the audience last night? 1, 2. Good. Do you share what we said about it? How did you think about? What did you think about it? Beautiful film.
And also, it was a very beautiful film, and I was very, very impressed by the main character, the girl. That I understood that she was not an actress, and it was an interesting theme that I didn't know really so much about.
Yeah. No, it's true, but she's not an actress. In fact,
No.
she's. We found her after,
She was a dancer. She's a dancer. She told me she's a dancer.
I didn't know she was a dancer. No, when I met her, she had done maybe some theater in school.
Some theater.
Yes, she was very
theater.
young. Yeah, but she never acted. That's why we had to take some time to see what she could do, what she couldn't do, because there are certain things you cannot push too much. If you don't have the technique, you better. And on the other hand, you're not just following the life of the person. It's hard to find like the boundaries where how deep you can go. And in fact, it's funny. We haven't seen much of the film, but for instance, she was really, because maybe she shared the idea about identity, because she questioned herself a little bit about her own identity. She was very open to show her up, to show her body, so she wasn't ashamed of being naked, going around and stuff. But the soul was the hardest part, because she was really ashamed of take out the sentimental side, and that was the most difficult part to do with her.
We had a limited time here today, but this was 2 examples of that we are very far from La Dolce Vita today in the Italian cinema, contemporary cinema, and I think that I consider myself almost Italian. We are going in the right direction for a broader spectrum of Italian films, and we will surely see more of Italian films in the Swedish cinemas in the future. And this is the kickoff in Gothenburg, and we hope we can continue also in other cities in the future. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.